Professional wrestling, a uniquely American art form whose timeless tales of good versus evil have touched countless generations of fans who have reveled in the ecstasy of the world's greatest form of entertainment. And sometimes it's really, really bad. This is the Obtuse Angles Wrestling Podcast with Kyle and Jeremy.
Welcome to the Obtuse Angles Wrestling Podcast.
Obtuse Angles Wrestling Podcast.
There we go. That's what it's all about.
I'm sorry to cut you off, man. I get so pumped up when we start these episodes.
I like our ghetto intro. Like every week, we don't need to pay someone to make a fucking intro for this thing. No, you just need to shout in the worst Vince McMahon / serial killer impression ever every single week, and then we'll save money that way.
Well, I mean, last week we were talking about, the announcer for like the truck pulls, $10 for the whole seat, but you only need the edge. I get pumped up, man. I get excited about these episodes.
I love those, man. I really enjoy old school pageantry, and I'm sure that it comes from wrestling, because that's what wrestling is. I mean, for as futuristic and mainstream as Vince McMahon likes WWE to be, it still is old school showmanship.
It's still wrestling.
And that's why I love it, man. That's why you're such a big NWA fan.
That's true, man.
I mean, my favorite style of wrestling ever was NWA.
My favorite style of wrestling was wrestling.
Yeah, really? Not sports entertainment?
No, it was wrestling.
Hold on, you're telling me that you didn't like it when stars like Grumpy Cat and the Muppets came on your wrestling show and did stupid bullshit? You didn't like that?
No, I didn't care.
Well, we are now, this is episode 2 of our 2-part discussion of missed opportunities in wrestling.
Episode 12.
Episode 12.
Part 2.
Part 2. And again, if you didn't hear part 1, go back and listen, but you don't necessarily have to, because we're just going to be continuing a thought, not necessarily the subjects from last week.
And not necessarily an important thought.
No, and it's arguably nothing that we say is ever important, but that's okay.
We're not incredibly serial here, but we have been getting a little serial lately with these 2-parters.
Yes, we have. And but before we get into it, like us, by the way, on Twitter, at Obtuse Podcast. Like us on Facebook, the Obtuse Angles Wrestling Show.
Subscribe to us on YouTube. And Jeremy, we are going to be on iTunes very, very soon, if not by the time you are listening to this episode. Obtuse Angles goes Libsyn.
As soon as we figure out exactly.
You don't know what it is. I don't know what it is.
What Libsyn is.
Who gives a shit?
But no, our goal is that by the time you hear this, it'll be on there. And I'll tell you how you find out. By liking us on Facebook and Twitter.
That's the best way to find out.
And we're going to have, and I forgot this buzz phrase last week, but I'm not this week, supplemental videos. Videos, pictures of all the things we talk about. Also, we take your suggestions on both Facebook and Twitter. We take your feedback. This is your show. I mean, I know a lot of people say that, and no, we're not going to invite you onto this show.
We get all the fanfare, and when we leave the studio, it's the chicks who are standing outside with the signs and stuff waiting to get a glimpse of us. But no, this is your show.
Right. I mean, we get the endless waterfall of blowjob after blowjob each and every single week.
And when I'm getting a tuggy out in the parking lot after we're done recording, it's basically you getting a tuggy in the parking lot after we're done recording.
Exactly. We almost called this podcast Your Endless Tuggies, but we didn't. We didn't because we're just a little bit classier than that. So
teach me how to tuggy.
It's not hard. Well, actually, it kind of has to be.
It's not hot.
It's not hot. The Dungeon. Oddly enough, the Dungeon of Doom episode, one of the most listened to podcasts.
Yes, isn't it? Yeah.
If you go on YouTube, and again, it's kind of hard to see how many people have listened to each episode because there's SoundCloud and there's YouTube, right? And the first few episodes were not on SoundCloud, so they have a lot of YouTube because, they haven't been split. But the Dungeon of Doom episode
Picking names and taking ass.
Well, it has more. It just blew my mind. I'm like, will people remember? Yeah, apparently so.
Yeah.
Apparently they love that one, and nobody gave 2 fucks about the Kennel from Hell because that's the one episode that, it's like, really?
Like it was bad, but it's so bad it didn't even register on a lot of people's radar.
Well, it was a good episode, but I guess I don't know. I mean, I thought that I did more research for Big Show's daddy dying than any episode we've ever done. Like I went back and listened. I watched every video.
Thinking back on it, Kyle, that was some of the funniest stuff that we covered was the whole Big Show's daddy angle, feeding the dead dog, so on and so forth.
So if you're listening to this episode and you like it, and I'm pretty confident that you will, go back and check out the Kennel from Hell episode. And again, I know we spent the first few minutes on this show stroking our dicks. That's okay, though. I'm going to say this right before we get back into the topic, that we designed this show to be evergreen, okay? We don't talk about topical stuff. We don't talk about topical wrestling. Eventually we will. That's fine. But we designed it so episode 1 you can listen to right now. You can listen to it a year from now, but please don't wait that long.
Right,
you know what
right.
I mean? But these episodes encapsulate a moment in time, and that's why we design them that way, to go back and check out previous episodes.
It's like an 80s sitcom. Like it's non-linear. There's no point where you really get lost. If you want to listen to episode 10 and then listen to episode 2 and then listen to episode 5, do it. You're in control.
We say that as we're about to start part 2 of our discussion.
Well, yeah. Well.
But again, though, you don't have to listen to last week. We're talking about the biggest missed opportunities in wrestling history. I teased this last week. I'm going to get to what I believe is the number 1 biggest missed opportunity in wrestling. And I'm going to mention it and we're going to talk about it, but I want to save that one for a future episode. It's so huge. That one will require a bunch of research. I'm going to start off with one that I think is going to take you by surprise. And I'm talking about the end of the AWA. The AWA wrestling promotion, obviously one of the most prestigious, successful wrestling promotions of the 60s and the 70s.
And now you're speaking my language.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, were you into the AWA?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes.
Well, so what are some of your AWA memories?
AWA, I liked the old AWA stuff in terms of the Flair and Dusty Rhodes battles in AWA.
Oh, sure.
I thought were brilliant. And actually watching Flair go from, it was kind of that was his stomping ground. That was like his learning point where you can actually kind of go back and watch some of that earlier stuff.
Yeah.
And you can see what was so...
Well, because he's from originally Minnesota.
Yeah.
Not even Charlotte. He's really from Minnesota.
And what you can see is it's really cool is that you start seeing shades of Ric Flair in his prime as they're being developed in the early stages. And that was wonderful.
And Flair, it's so funny because he evolved not only as a wrestler and as a character, but his body evolved.
Yeah.
Like he was never fat, he was muscular, but it was like that football lineman muscle fat that he had.
Yeah, he looked like a strong man or something, man. It was really weird. And if you'll go back and watch some of that old AWA stuff, and I swear to God, I know a lot of our listeners, huge wrestling fans, may think or may have thought that this footage never really existed. But if you go back and watch AWA, you can actually see Hulk Hogan earning his paycheck.
No, God damn it, I don't believe it.
You can, man. You can go back and actually watch Hulk Hogan do wrist locks and do hammer locks and do float overs and headlocks.
You know what's crazy is that Hogan actually can, or at least he could do that shit.
Yeah.
I've never, look, I'm not huge into Japanese wrestling. I wish I was. I just didn't grow up with it.
I am a real American.
Exactly. I've heard that right now in Japan, they're just tearing it up.
Yeah.
I've heard that they are as hot as they've ever been. They're kicking ass. And I would like to get into it, but I'm not. So I've never really seen Hulk Hogan in his Japanese days because he went to Japan. He would tour in the 80s. And apparently, we're so used to the shitty Hogan 80s match that was it was the exact opposite of the Ric Flair 80s classics in NWA.
Yes.
And Hulk Hogan was on top. And again, he made $8 trillion. So what the fuck do we know?
Right.
It worked, so why change it? But, in the 80s, Hogan would, every match, obviously, he would get in, he would get his shine, he would take the heat for about 3.5 hours, Hulk up, 3 punches, big boot, leg drop. But apparently in the 80s, Hogan in Japan could fucking work.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was forced to. I mean, we went over and worked in promotions where wrestlers were actually wrestlers. They actually wrestled matches. They weren't I mean, there were promos, of course, but there was no real pageantry.
Right,
I mean,
right.
The language was spoken inside the ring.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when Hogan went over, when he jumped over and started doing these tours in the 80s with, these Japanese promotions, he really actually had to show his wrestlers. It's like, your big boot and leg drop's not going to fly here, little man.
Well, I don't think he was a little man over there. But,
well, not relatively, no.
But I mean, you know what? You talk about how the language was inside of the ring as in regards to Japanese wrestling, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't get is that wrestling in Japan, especially a few years ago, and even now, it's an art form. And obviously, it's an art form in America, but it's not seen that way by the people outside of the wrestling bubble. I mean, in Japan, that's why if you ever watch a show, anytime WWE went over there, WCW, people would sit and they would watch.
There's
silently.
no pop.
It was like the
because
opera.
It was considered disrespectful.
Exactly. It was like watching an opera. I mean, and even like 10 years ago, they wear suits.
Yeah.
Because it was like going to an opera. Like you would sit and watch this art, and then slowly there'd be no pop, but there would be this roar of the crowd that as the match built, they would, the crowd would build with it.
But that's as big as it got.
Yeah, man. And then they would all applaud.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, man.
I can't believe we talked about Hulk Hogan and didn't take at least a 10-minute section of the show to talk about my new mustache.
I'm sorry. Jeremy
It's okay. I blew by it, too.
Sporting a brand new flavor saver, as it were.
Oh, yeah.
You got the Fu Manchu. You got the Hogan going. I like it, man. I did.
I'm a one handsome motherfucker.
You look like a combination of an Old West outlaw and Hulk Hogan if he had astigmatism. You know what I mean? Like that's
that's exactly what I'm going for. It's like you know me.
It's like I do. It's like I can feel you.
It's like you're inside me.
I will be soon.
And it'll be like the fans were inside me too, because it's their show.
It's their show. Yes. Oh God. So yeah, but no, the reason I say AWA in the end was AWA, despite the fact that they were dying for a long time, had national cable penetration. Yeah, penetration. I know. Laugh. They were on ESPN every single day of the week.
That's because no one had told ESPN that it wasn't really a sport yet.
Well, you're right about that. I think ESPN Classic still late at night shows.
They were working ESPN.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, you think it's the damnedest thing. The show always wraps up exactly on the hour. All the matches are exciting. It's crazy.
It is.
I mean, I wouldn't think that 60-year-old Vern Gagne would still be champion, but apparently he's the best. But no, I mean, like ESPN, they had national coverage. They were AWA in the early 90s was a legacy promotion, and yes, they were a dying promotion. I'll never forget, man. I was the biggest wrestling fan in the world. Started watching wrestling in like 90, 91, and I was a WWF kid. And then a few months later, I became, I watched them both. I watched WCW. I'd never heard of AWA.
Right.
And then one day I come home from school because that's when AWA aired, was in the afternoon. I come home from first grade and I turn the TV on and I see wrestling. And I'm like, oh my God, there's wrestling every day after school? It was like the best day of my life.
Yeah, well, it wasn't like live shows, though. It was just syndicated old episodes. But.
And then I'll never forget, the next day I came home and it was canceled. I was So I swear to God, I saw like the AWA's last televised
I never
program.
could. I lived in a small town that was monopolized by one particular cable company throughout the years. So I was never able to get AWA when it was being syndicated. That would come later in my tape trading days.
Yeah, as we talked about last week.
We did, man. I missed those days.
You and Rob Feinstein were buddies until they got busted by To Catch a Predator.
Yeah, for some reason, I decided that it's best that I don't associate myself with him anymore.
With Rob Feinstein? Are you sure?
Well, we just grew apart.
Yeah, of course, yeah. He was into kids, I wasn't.
Yeah. Well, there's so many vast differences. It was bound to happen.
Yeah, Vern Gagne failed to adapt, and the company went out of business. So that's one. Do you have any more on your list from last week? I know that we got through a lot of...
I do, but it's not really an angle. It's a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity, I think, and you can argue with me on this, and it's fine. A lot of people will. I think it's a missed opportunity with one of the finest workers this business has ever seen in the franchise Shane Douglas.
I completely agree. As a matter of fact, when I wrestled one of my finishing moves, and I very, very rarely got the chance to use this because, as many people say, I spent almost every match, the end of it, staring up at the lights, but it was Shane Douglas's franchiser in WCW.
It wasn't ripping off. It was homage.
It was homage to Shane Douglas, and I also paid homage when I took Percocets after every show. That's what I
and I think that's the most sincere way to pay homage. Really
I think it is. I love Shane Douglas, man. When you say Shane Douglas in WCW or WWF, or both?
He come in, is broken in by he broke in alongside Cactus Jack, if you'll recall. He broke in with Mick Foley and
Dominic
DeNucci. I couldn't think.
His wrestling school.
The Italian guy.
Italian guy.
He broke in there. Was an amazing prospect. Of course, went on to his first big run with fame, the Dynamic Dudes.
Oh,
if
man.
you remember that horrible 80s, early 90s skater gimmick thing.
My dream is to have people listening to this show who are wrestling fans, but maybe they're casual, or maybe they're younger people who don't know a whole lot about older wrestling. It's not like the Dynamic Dudes are covered a lot.
Right.
Although when Johnny Ace, John Laurinaitis, was feuding with Punk, they actually brought that up a couple of years ago on WWE TV. But the Dynamic Dudes, for those of you who hopefully maybe are younger and don't know, were when John Laurinaitis and Shane Douglas teamed in WCW, and their gimmick was they were two cool early 90s surfer dudes, man.
Just dudes.
They were dudes.
And that was in the early 90s when everything was like neon. You remember everybody just wore neon? Every outfit, every pair of tights that Sting owned were like a neon color.
Every wrestling show looked like Saved by the Bell.
It
was incredible.
It really did. Remember the neon windbreakers they would wear? I used to get on my skateboard and put on a neon windbreaker and pretend I was one of the Dynamic Dudes.
Well, man, going back to the AWA, the dying days of the AWA, they taped that in a TV studio where the walls were pink.
Yeah.
Like, if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about the early 90s. But I really felt like every single Raw for a while was taped in the Juicer where Zach and Kelly hung out
right,
on Saved by. I think it was the Juicer, right?
Yeah. You're talking about the little cantina they hung out in?
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was called.
And by the way, what was the deal with like the Power Rangers hung out in a juice bar and Saved by the Bell? Remember that?
They really did, yeah.
Where the fuck are these fictitious juice bars where like these hot 16-year-old pieces of ass are hanging out?
Can I go off the rails a bit for you?
And thank you for just
I'm gonna
blowing on past my statutory range. Yeah, go ahead.
I was doing you a favor.
I know.
Here's the thing, man. When I watched Saved by the Bell as a kid, Tiffany Amber Thiessen.
Oh my God!
I had the weirdest boner for her.
I don't think that's weird at all.
It's really weird, man. I would go on to just spread all kinds of seed into all about my bedroom to images of Tiffany Amber Thiessen. It's really weird. And now I go back and I can watch some of these reruns on TBS.
Oh, yeah.
It comes on at 7 in the morning. You can watch 2 hours of Saved by the Bell.
Which, by the way, that has to be the most consistently run rerun show in a time. That's been on at 7 o'clock in the morning on TBS for at least 16 years.
Yeah, longer than its original run when it was on
NBC,
prime time. Yeah,
way longer. Yeah.
Here's the thing. Let me ask you this: you ever try to go back and polish the old knob, rub one out to
whatever
the stars of yesteryear?
Absolutely, I do. Yeah.
Here's why I can't do that now. Because if I were to sit down tonight, for example, and try to strum the old banjo to Tiffany Amber Thiessen, I can't do it.
Why?
Because it would be doing it to her in the 90s.
Yeah.
And she's got a gigantic bush.
Well, I think that the bush was gradually making its exit as the 90s went on. So maybe it wasn't.
I don't think at that time.
Maybe it wasn't gigantic. But here's the thing, though, and I'm going to say this. I'm a bush man.
Well, I'm not, sir. I'm not.
And I don't mean that in the racist Australian way. No, I mean that
you don't drink Bush Light.
No, here's the thing. The bush isn't my preference, but I enjoy a good bush to spice things up a bit.
See, I can't. I just can't. Okay, let me give you a better example of that then. Okay, the bush either may or may not have been going out in the early 90s. It probably wasn't a gigantic one. Okay,
it might. I don't know.
I'll give you
maybe
that.
Maybe it had an afro pick in it. I don't know.
Elizabeth Montgomery.
Oh, Bewitched.
Bewitched.
Yeah, dude.
Oh, I had the biggest crush on her
when it came on Nick at Night in the 90s, right?
Yes.
Or the reruns. Bro, I'm becoming Vince Russo. I'm so excited about it. Let me tell you something, bro. I fucking love Elizabeth Montgomery.
I have fucked Elizabeth Montgomery in my mind probably more than I've ever fucked anyone.
You have rubbed that genie's bottle, baby. Are you Larry Hagman in your masturbation fantasies?
No.
Because like that whole show, the premise of that show was a porno.
Well, you're thinking of I Dream of Jeannie.
Oh God, you're right.
I'm talking Bewitched.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
But no. Sometimes I would pretend I was Dick York.
You're right. Do you call your penis Dick York?
Yeah, I do.
No, he's Dick Sargent.
He's Dick Sargent.
Dick Sargent.
He's the better Darren Stevens.
Dick Sargent is the best porn name ever, by the way, of all time.
I can't possibly agree more.
You're right. Elizabeth Montgomery. See, I always thought Elizabeth Montgomery was hot, but I'm sorry, Barbara Eden. I Dream of Jeannie.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. That show was a porno. You have a handsome astronaut guy and this sexy piece of ass who calls him master and literally has to do every single thing that he says. You're like, they didn't have sex for the first 9 seasons.
I'm gonna have to pause this episode and go
right.
rip one out right now.
Right.
Oh, okay. Here's 2 weird things about that. Okay, you've spanked to Elizabeth Montgomery. I've spanked to Elizabeth Montgomery. Barbara Eden. Here's 2 weird things about that. For one, I couldn't get outside of my head knowing that show aired in the early '60s because if you remember, the earlier seasons were in black and white. The later seasons became in color.
Yeah.
Gigantic bush, and I can't get past that. Sometimes I could power through it. Other times I couldn't.
Really?
It's really weird. And here's another thing. You're jerking off to someone who's been dead for a really long time.
That is the weird thing. I try to go back and I'll watch 8 Mile or something with Brittany Murphy.
Yeah.
And it's like, she's dead, but that makes it hard. No, I'm kidding. That's not what I said. I am gonna pose to you. I'm gonna pose to you,
please,
the most inappropriate thing ever said on this podcast.
Oh boy, it's gonna have to be a good one.
And I really hope that we don't lose some listeners on this. Okay, it's all for comedic purposes. Brittany Murphy, died. She was found dead in the shower.
Yeah.
Let's say you're a cleaning guy, whatever. You're a friend. You stumble in.
Where this is going.
You stumble into that bathroom. Brittany. You open the door. You pull back the shower curtain. There's Brittany Murphy laying there in the shower. Do you?
I got to tell you right now, just with you telling me this, you setting this up, I just went from 6 to midnight.
We have disgusted so many people. Do you have any idea how many people have just hit stop?
Oh, I mean, yes, by the way, is the answer. Just in case. I mean, I didn't think that was rhetorical, right?
I only say this as a plug for episode 1, Katie Vick. Go back and
That's where we were going with this. Yeah, we're pretending that's where we were going.
So we have deviated so far from the discussion this week. We have wrestling's biggest missed opportunities.
I think it's because we stayed so on point last episode. It was literally fucking killing us.
I think we had to talk about spanking it to Barbara Eden. That
absolutely,
had to
man. It was due.
So going back to wrestling's biggest missed opportunities, DDP in WWE. That is one for me.
Yeah.
If you remember, after WWF purchased WCW, they didn't have a whole lot of the talent. They had. It took a couple of months, but after a couple of months, they had Booker T. You okay? You laughing?
DDP.
Yay
or nay?
Barry Horowitz. They again. That's a callback to last week's episode, which in itself was a callback to an episode a couple of months ago. But they didn't have a whole lot of talent. They had talent, but they didn't have the big names.
Right.
When the invasion angle happened, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. When the invasion angle happened, they had no Kevin Nash, no Hulk Hogan, no Scott Hall, no Sting, no Ric Flair. They had Lance Storm, Booker T. That was Mike Awesome. That's pretty much it as far as the star power goes when WWF purchased WCW. And then DDP makes his debut. Remember how they debuted him? Were you watching at that time?
Well, no, I don't believe so. I mean, I probably was. I don't remember. I don't recall exactly how.
It was the WCW.
15 years.
I know, man. Right? No, that was 01. It was 14. It was 14. See, it wasn't that long ago.
I ain't good at math.
Undertaker's wife had a stalker, and they showed this video for weeks and weeks of somebody narrating it. It was like a camcorder that was at Undertaker's house, and he zoomed in through the windows, and it was DDP, and he debuted, and he comes out, which debuting DDP as a heel in the first place, I thought was stupid because the people, DDP was
God, he was on fire, man.
He was, other than Goldberg, I really think the one star that WCW created on their own. He was never in WWF.
So deserving of it, too.
He worked his ass off. Really? I mean, such an inspirational story, man. A guy who got into the ring.
35 years old.
35 years old. He was a manager, and then he was a fucking wrestler.
And he wanted to be in the business so bad that he used to actually pay for his own airfare in hotels just to get booked.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, he's paid his dues.
He busted he went to the power plant even after he started on TV.
He spent 4 years maybe on top,
getting better. But he got better, and he won that world title. I think it was 90. If it wasn't 98, it was actually it was 99 because I think his first main event one-on-one match ever in a WCW pay-per-view was against Goldberg at Halloween Havoc 98. Great fucking match, by the way. Maybe the best of Goldberg's career. It was either that or the one he had with Jericho when Goldberg went to WWE.
Well, that speaks volumes in and of itself. I mean, if somebody can get into the ring with Goldberg and make Goldberg look like $1 million.
Well, because, and you're right about that. And DDP, and I've heard this said a million times, was a guy who wasn't the best improvisational artist inside of the ring. He couldn't walk and talk necessarily. He could, but he wasn't great at calling it on the fly. But he was like Savage. Savage was a guy like that who had
he would rehearse literally every single inch of every single match.
Yeah, and DDP was the same way, which I really think, by the way, Savage kind of made DDP in WCW, and you got to think the two of them wrestling, like that match had to be the most meticulously fucking crafted match ever.
It's like watching two people with OCD clean a house or something.
Right, or two people in Kentucky on meth.
Oh, yeah.
So DDP finally makes it the late WCW, 99, 2000, into 01. Huge star. People love the guy. WCW gets bought by WWF. A few months into the invasion, he makes his debut. He comes to the ring. He pulls a mask off. And even though he's a heel, and even though this character has been stalking Taker's wife, fucking huge pop.
Oh, yeah.
The crowd just, DDP, DDP. And then he wrestles The Undertaker at a pay-per-view and gets his ass kicked. It really was like Undertaker was wrestling Barry O back in the day. You remember Barry O? I mean, it was like it was like WWF, or it was like Vince was going out of his way to fuck him over.
You got to look at that whole invasion thing. Like Vince maybe saw some stars, and I think he took a lot of that personal. Like a lot of the guys that jumped ship from WWE when they were hurting the big money contracts. You got to think that Vince kind of took that personally and was like, he took the opportunity to give them their kind of comeuppance, their payback. If you want to this, and then here's this, you can't,
Well, you're right about that, and I think that Vince did take it personally. But here's the thing, though. Vince always talks about how he covets loyalty, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he coveted the loyalty of The Undertaker all those years who stayed with him. He coveted Shawn Michaels, who could have made the jump, but he never did. So why wouldn't he respect the loyalty of DDP, a guy who was with WCW the whole run, never jumped? And you got to think that at some point they made an offer to DDP, so why wouldn't he reward him?
Because DDP wasn't Vince McMahon's brainchild, I think, is why. There was somebody who was larger than life, who arguably one of the biggest stars, definitely of that era.
Oh, absolutely,
if not of all time.
Oh, yeah.
And Vince, you got to think that maybe it pissed Vince off that it wasn't Vince that created him. Maybe.
Well, he surely.
At least that's the picture I have of Vince McMahon. I mean, I don't know the guy personally.
Well, no, but that's what. Are you? Hold on. Are you telling me right now on this podcast you were publicly saying, Jeremy, that you do not hang out.
I don't know where people are getting that. They ask me that all the time. I don't hang out with Vince McMahon.
All the time. I mean, you get phone calls all the time, like from Fit Finley. Hey, Jeremy, I tried reaching Vince on his cell phone. He's not answering. Do you know where he is? You're like, Fit, I don't know Vince.
I do. Like they expect me to go, oh, yeah, he's right here. Let me just hand you my phone to him. It's weird. I don't know.
You know, right now somebody out there is going, what? People think that?
Some people out there are going, oh, so he really doesn't know Vince. I thought he did.
You know, if 11 years of radio have taught me anything, it's that no matter how silly or over the top you think a joke is,
somebody buys it.
There's always somebody who believes the bullshit. Like we did this bit one time, and again, I work in radio here in Lexington on a radio station, Z-Rock 103. We did this bit one time where it was during the Tiger Woods cheating scandal. And it was like Tiger Woods, we mashed up audio of Tiger Woods and talking to somebody else, and essentially it was Tiger coming out of the closet, right? It was like it was edited, and it was clearly edited and badly edited, and we play it and we laugh, and then we get a phone call right afterward of this guy, this listener going, hi, man, did Tiger come out of the closet last night? Are you fucking really? Like, God damn it.
Did you try to sell him a bridge?
I did. And he made me a millionaire on that day with fake money. But yeah, and I think that DDP finally began to get his feet under him. After the invasion angle happened, they kind of, because DDP had the DDP yoga at the time, which, by the way, I've been doing DDP yoga.
I was going to ask you about that when you first brought up DDP. How's your DDP yoga going?
Oh, man. Well, I'll get to that in a second, because I only got about an hour and a half on DDP yoga. No, but they made him a generic motivational speaker based on the yoga he was doing, and it got over. And then he became a baby face, and he feuded with Christian, and then he broke his fucking neck. He had back damage, which really kind of begat the yoga really taking off more. But no, I love DDP yoga, man.
Spoiler alert: is there a chance that you're going to be facing Jake the Snake Roberts anytime soon, like Heroes of Wrestling 2, or?
Well, I have been contacted by both DDP and Jake the Snake. I don't want to publicly talk about this yet because
sure, I understand.
We're trying to get the number down. We're trying to get the
keep a lid on it.
Trying to get the figure right. I want the high seven figures. DDP only wants to pay me the low seven figures. So, no, I like, man. I tell you what.
And Jake will just take crack. That's so fucking mean. I'm so sorry, Jake the Snake.
And he's clean.
I know
now.
You're doing your best, man.
I'm
very sorry. That was a cheap shot.
I'll say this, though, man. If anybody out there, if you want to get in shape and you hate running and you hate weights, DDP yoga, man.
Yeah.
Seriously. It's great. I mean, I feel a lot better. I still eat like shit and smoke, but I feel better.
You feel better about the horrible decisions you're making.
Exactly. So, do you have any more of wrestling's biggest missed opportunities over there on your list, Jeremy?
I don't, man. I think we knocked out a lot of mine on the last episode, and of course, the last one that I really felt passionately about was the Shane Douglas angle. I'm a huge Shane Douglas fan. I have been ever since the early days of ECW.
I'm going to say this. You're right. I don't think we really talked too much about the Shane Douglas angle. Shane Douglas was a great worker, and when he came after the Dynamic Dudes, when they would come down to the ring and they were holding skateboards.
Yeah.
They weren't riding the skateboards to the ring.
They never would. They would hold them.
Which was a dead giveaway to everyone that they could not, in fact, ride the skateboard.
It was Honky Tonk Man's guitar.
He went to ECW. Shane Douglas was a badass on the mic. I mean, he cut the promo that started
the
ECW.
Promo that ushered out Eastern Championship Wrestling and brought in Extreme Championship Wrestling.
And then he goes to WWF, and they make him into a fucking dean. He's a teacher. And then he goes to WCW, and I think when he went to WCW, I think they did a much better job with him than WWF did. But at the same time, I think that Shane wasn't as good in the ring by the late 90s. He had some issues with it.
It was his neck, I think.
It was his neck, yeah. And plus, I mean, in WCW, they were kind of on the downside, so that ship had sailed. But you're right.
I mean, the whole thing he did with Gary Wolf, Pitbull number 1.
Oh, yeah, man.
That was, that angle was really bad. I mean, that really got him over as a heel. You remember they had Gary Wolf legitimately in a halo.
Yeah, yeah.
And he grabs, Gary Wolf by the halo and starts shaking him and throws him down.
Yeah.
And he was in that halo because of Shane Douglas.
Aren't both of the Pitbulls dead now, by the way? Are they both dead? I don't even know.
I want to say I think so, and that's terrible.
Oh, yeah.
They were one of the great tag teams of that era.
And both members of Public Enemy
Unsung
are dead, too.
Unsung heroes.
Unsung heroes, yeah. And plus Public Enemy both did. Neither one of them from a drug overdose, by the way, I don't think.
That surprised me as much as hearing that they were dead. That it wasn't,
I know.
No, not to be mean,
you're right, but Ted Petty.
I thought for sure if Flyboy Rocco Rock was going to bite it, I thought for sure cocaine was going to be involved.
It was a heart attack in the ring, and maybe drugs.
Well, cocaine may have been involved.
Yeah, because I remember when he died, it was really early, too. It was like 2001 or something, but yeah. So now that we all got incredibly depressing on
it was awful, yeah.
The new Monday Night Wars, that is on my list. The new and by that I mean when TNA decided to go to Monday nights to go up against Monday Night Raw.
You mean the unwar? Only one of those companies was waging war, and the other one had no idea.
It lasted, yeah. Well, you know what though? No, I'll say this: I am a fan of TNA. They have fucked up so many times, but they still have a great talent roster. It's not WWE. It looks different. It feels different. That's why I enjoy it. And I really get pissed off whenever bad things happen to TNA, when everybody online rejoices about it. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, are you not a wrestling fan? Yeah. Do you not want there
Here's
to be...
an opportunity to see more wrestling of what you love, and you're just you're laughing at it as it falls.
Yeah, but you're such a snarky piece of shit that you're
could be wrong. Sometimes it's funny. But
no, I mean, it is, but... But no, so I really thought that if TNA ever had the opportunity to become nearly as successful as WWE, it was in January of 2010. Think about that. The new Monday Night Wars, 5 years ago. God, 5.5 years ago now.
Yeah, that's weird.
We're gonna be dead before we know it.
I'm so old right now.
You are
like I was 33 last week. I'm 47 today. I don't even know how that happened.
You age exponentially. You somehow caught the Jack disease that Robin Williams had. But no, I mean I really thought it was in 2010, man. And when Bischoff and Hogan came over, I remember everybody gave TNA shit for hiring Bischoff and Hogan. I thought it was a good idea. I mean, and Hogan opened up a lot of doors for TNA. I mean,
I thought if they stood a chance of going somewhere, really going toe-to-toe with WWE, I think the whole Hogan coming in and basically hiring all of his friends was going to be, like, I thought it had potential for good business because I thought we were going to see the WCW/WWE of the 90s again.
Absolutely,
that feud, kind of them going head-to-head, but it failed to, I think it failed to really get there.
And even though Hogan had the ego issues and Eric Bischoff took WCW to the greatest heights of all time. He started the Monday Night Wars, which subsequently created the wrestling boom of the late 90s. Yeah. That being said, he also rested on his laurels and created a shitty product, but I was optimistic. TNA, in order to kind of gauge the waters with Spike TV, ran, I believe it was a 3-hour live Impact on a Monday night. They popped a 1.5 rating, which was a huge rating. I mean, granted, WWE does about 2.8s now and 3.0s, but we got to understand, though, WWE, the highest rated show on cable. So a 1.5, Spike TV, even though that's half of WWE, Spike TV, man, they were thrilled.
Right.
Like, that's a huge number for a Monday night, and that's a huge number to grow on. So because of that number, they did a few more weeks of Thursdays. They got their ducks in a row. Boom. They do the new Monday Night Wars. I remember the first episode, they debuted Jeff Hardy.
And I believed for the first few weeks that it might actually turn into a real collision, a real battle. But
because TNA really was busting their ass and they were trying hard. Yeah. And you know what? It felt... I read Eric Bischoff's book, Controversy Creates Cash. That's his autobiography, and
of course it is.
It's very self-serving. He admits to exactly one mistake in his entire fucking
Eric
career.
Bischoff being self-serving. I can't wrap my head around.
But I'll say this: he had a great game plan when Nitro went up against Raw. He said he tried to do everything possible to make Nitro look different. And that's why he put the announcer's desk near the entrance instead of, near the ring.
Right.
That's why they would shoot outside. They would shoot at Disney. They would have different, because it felt fresh and it felt new. And that's what he did with TNA when they started the new Monday Night Wars.
See, I don't think that's what he was doing. I think he was trying to make TNA WCW in the 90s. I actually enjoyed TNA in the early days, back when they were just they weren't trying to compete. They were just trying to do their own thing. The 6-sided ring, and of course Jeff Jarrett at the helm, and You know, the when their two biggest stars were like Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles. And
well, because it felt different. I mean, TNA. Well, here's the thing.
Yeah, they weren't trying to compete. They were like, this is what we do, and if you like it, watch it. You know, it just seemed...
and they were doing well.
Yeah.
They were. I don't think that TNA ever did better, as at least creatively, and they did great numbers too. Then right before Bischoff and Hogan came in for a couple of years, they focused on the X division. They focused on that high-flying new style of AJ Styles.
Entire pay-per-views dedicated to
Absolutely. AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, again, the six-sided ring, as we mentioned last week, less space between the ropes, which gives more springboard, which lends itself to aerial moves.
Right.
I mean, a very exciting style and a new and fresh look, and that was kind of something that Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan took away. They took away the six-sided ring. They have it back
I think
now.
it just confused Hogan.
I think it did. Brother, where am I going to tag? My glaucoma. But
this ring is not hot.
It's not hot. Episode 7, Dungeon of Doom. I'm just gonna plug
This
other
fucking
shows.
shameless.
I know. I fucking know.
I love it.
The Monday Night Wars, though, man, I thought for a minute that it was gonna. I thought it was gonna, and WWE thought it was gonna be competitive too, because for a while they
got a little scared, didn't they?
I don't even know if they got scared, but they were watching. They were analyzing the numbers.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a stretch. It's hard for Vince to get scared of much of anything. But yeah, I think he might have. There might have been a smattering.
A smattering, yeah. But unfortunately, it just didn't work out. And I think maybe what we should do. I think eventually, when TNA goes out of business and WWE buys them and puts all the Impact episodes on the WWE Network, we should cover the Monday Night Wars fully and extensively in its own episode on this show.
Like a 6-parter.
And you know what? Let's get to the number one thing as we, again, are approaching the...
You've been clamoring for it.
We're approaching the Broadway here. We're approaching the time limit draw.
TV time remaining.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes. Here's a couple of things I wanted to hit up that I didn't get the chance to in this podcast, and we're going to hit up later on as far as biggest missed opportunities go. Vince Russo in WCW after he left WWF. Dean Malenko in WWE. Shotgun Saturday Night after the first month. The Big Show's first few years in the WWF. Bret Hart in WCW. Eugene, who we've already hit up. And before I get to my number one, we have been tweeted at by quite a few people, actually, because we asked you on Twitter. We said, what are wrestling's biggest missed opportunities? And we had Victor, who hit us up, and again, at Obtuse Podcast on Twitter. So Victor told us, he said my number one, which I'm going to mention here in a second, but he also said Nexus, Kurt Angle, and Stephanie hooking up.
Yeah.
That's a big one. And Kofi Kingston versus Randy Orton. It's so, we could honestly do a 3-parter. I'm tempted to do it. But if we can hit that in a nutshell.
Right in the nutshell.
Right in the nutshell. Kofi Kingston versus Randy Orton. Kofi was on fire. They had a match at Madison Square Garden about 5 years ago. Kofi was getting over. Kofi missed one spot. And you actually see Randy Orton throw a temper tantrum on TV. He goes, "You're stupid." Kind of like Shawn Michaels.
Shawn Michaels and Vader, yeah.
Yeah, and that was it. That was it for Kofi Kingston's push. Randy Orton, to this day, decries those accusations. He says that he does not have the power to stop someone's push. I'm just saying that's what happened.
Yeah.
Kurt Angle and Stephanie hooking up. I thought that was a great angle. But the problem with it and the gigantic missed opportunity was the payoff. Yeah. And that was Triple H and Kurt Angle, or Triple H and Stephanie were married, not in real life at the time, but kayfabe-wise.
Right.
And then Stephanie had a crush on Kurt Angle. And
as we all did.
Of course, that handsome, hot piece of ass. And then when it came time for choosing, she chose Triple H over Angle, and the whole angle just felt moot.
Quite literally.
Yes. So, but no, the number one thing ever.
Here it is, drummer roll.
I think the number one missed opportunity ever, obviously, the invasion.
Yeah.
The invasion, man.
Seemingly limitless possibilities of what they could have done with that.
I wouldn't even say seemingly. I would really think mathematically, if you took
infinite.
If you took both companies to NASA and threw them in the supercomputer, it's fucking infinite.
Right, yeah.
I mean, for years, wrestling, the number one thing that wrestling fans ever wanted was WWF versus WCW.
What a super card.
A super card, man. The ultimate super card. They won.
Where WWE's would have won every single match.
And it happened. It happened. Vince bought WCW. And yes, WCW was over the hill, but guess what? Their ratings, WCW Nitro's ratings at the time were better than what Raw's ratings are now.
Yeah.
So that's how many people, and they botched the invasion angle so bad that almost all of those people who were exclusively watching WCW back in the day left. They left. They didn't come over to Raw because I think in my mind, they didn't like what WWF did.
Right.
And you know, the argument might be, well, they didn't have the star power. Okay, they had DDP. Like I said, they had Lance Storm. They had Booker T. They had Mike Awesome. They had Shane Douglas if they wanted him. And then later on, they had Bill Goldberg. They had Rey Mysterio. They had Sting, Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall. And those guys were under deals to Turner. But
it wasn't a matter. I don't think it's a matter of who you have or who you don't have. When you're the only major wrestling promotion, you can have any wrestler in the world.
Oh yeah,
it's just it's like they find a way to just suck,
fuck up everything,
fucking fuck everything.
I have said this a million times. That's why I'm so terrified about Kevin Owens in WWE, because Kevin Owens is amazing. I knew he was going to be amazing. We all knew he was going to be amazing. So history tells us they're going to fuck it up.
Yeah,
because they always do, right? It's like only the things that suck. The only things that Vince can make good now are the things that suck. Like the tag team, The New Day, everybody hated them. They had no heat. They were awful. Vince turns him, I'm assuming Vince, whoever turns him heel, they're the hottest thing in wrestling.
Right.
They're great. But anything, like any can't miss prospect. Bill Goldberg, fuck it up. DDP, fuck it up. The Invasion, fuck it up. And the reason that I saved The Invasion for the very end of the podcast is because I want to do a whole episode on it. And that's going to take a lot of research, a lot of wrestling, a lot of whiskey to make it through, probably chicken wire around my TV set so when I throw the whiskey bottle at the TV in disgust, it doesn't break the TV.
Well, we don't make a lot of money on this podcast, so it's hard to keep replacing televisions.
Yeah, you know, shockingly, all those tuggies don't lead to a lot of cash.
No, they don't.
And with that, we have come full circle in this podcast. We have talked about...
Teach me how to tuggy. Teach me.
Please make that and we'll download it. So hopefully by now we're on iTunes, and if not, we're going to be soon. And next week, if we're not, then we'll all laugh about this together, and we'll...
If next week we're not, we'll just make more excuses. So no big deal.
Exactly, yeah. But again, thank you so much for listening to the Obtuse Angles Wrestling Podcast with Kyle and Jeremy.
We love you so much.
We love you so much. This is your show.
It's your show.
Two former professional wrestlers, current comedians, wise-ass, smart-ass motherfuckers, and then most importantly, above all, anything else, wrestling fans. Tell your friends about this podcast. Like us at Obtuse Podcast on Twitter. Also, the Facebook page, the Obtuse Angles Wrestling Facebook page. And we're going to have more hijinks next week, more fun, and eventually, Jeremy, we're going to get to the invasion angle. It's going to happen.
I'm stoked, man. I can't wait.
Were you just paid to say that?
It felt like it, didn't it?
It really did.
Yeah, like I should be holding up a product with the label facing out.
Like that, you were so obviously faking it that I feel like I should be in a relationship with you.
Yeah,
right
yeah. Here's the thing: the invasion angle, man. It's just it's going to be hard to get behind because it's anger for a wrestling fan. It's really it's like picking a scab.
It's incredibly frustrating, man.
It is, man.
So we'll see you guys here next week. Same Warrior place, same Warrior channel.
I'm out to play.